A child betrayed, beaten, and starved in the midst of a palace. A man carrying fear, power, and the loss of love. Ivan was not born a monster, the world made him one. This is the darkest and most tragic psychological journey in Russian history. Watch and ask yourself, if you were Ivan, would you be any different? The birth of a tragedy, Moscow, August 25th, 1530. Church bells rang across the snow-covered city. Ivan Vasilievich was born, the only son of Grand Duke Vasily III, a healthy child with bright eyes. The entire nation celebrated.
To the air!
They did not know that they had just witnessed the birth of one of the most tragic and complex figures in history. But the tragedy began painfully early. In 1533, when Ivan was just 3 years old, his father, Vasily III, died of blood poisoning. Power passed to his mother, Elena Glinskaya, a young woman in a court full of hungry wolves. And here's what I want you to understand. In Ivan's world, there was no room for trust. The boyar clans, powerful nobles, refused to accept a woman and a child ruling the country. They began their power games, poisoning, assassinations, coups. And in 1538, when Ivan was 8, his mother died suddenly. Many believe she was poisoned. Can you imagine it? 8 years old, orphaned by both parents, alone in a palace full of people who wanted you dead. From 1538 to 1547, Ivan lived through what historians call the Dark Period. The boyar clans, particularly the Shwisky and Belsky families, fought for regency. They treated Ivan as a pawn, a harmless symbol. But they also despised him. They beat him, starved him, humiliated him in his own royal chambers. There's a historical record that tells of a time when Ivan, hungry, begged for food from the palace cook. But the Shwisky's guards beat him and ate his food in front of him. Let me repeat, they beat a child, a future king, in his own palace. This wasn't just physical violence. This was the destruction of a child's soul. I want you to understand this. When you grow up in an environment where trust equals death, your brain learns to survive. You learn to observe, to remember, and most importantly, you learn to never allow yourself to be weak again. Ivan had no other choice. He stayed silent, he observed, and he remembered every face, every word, every scornful glance. In 1543, at just 13 years old, Ivan did something that shocked the entire court. He ordered the arrest of Andrei Shwisky, the leader of the clan that had abused him for years, and had him thrown into a kennel of hunting dogs. Shwisky was torn apart by the hounds. That was the first time the child took revenge. And the most terrifying part? Ivan felt no guilt. He felt justice. Here's the question I want to leave you with. If you were Ivan, what would you do? Would you seek revenge, or would you forgive those who turned your childhood into hell? Ivan, 17 years old, stood in the Dormition Cathedral in the Kremlin. This was no ordinary coronation. Ivan didn't just want to be a Grand Duke like his forefathers. He proclaimed himself Tsar of all Russia, the Tsar of all Rus. The word Tsar comes from Caesar, the Roman emperor. This meant that Ivan didn't just want to be a local lord. He wanted to be God's chosen, standing equal to the Byzantine emperors. This is how a wounded child rewrote the rules of power. Just weeks after his coronation, Ivan married Anastasia Romanovna. This was not a political marriage. This was true love, and that was rare for a Tsar. Anastasia was a gentle, wise woman, and more importantly, she was the only anchor keeping Ivan from the abyss. With Anastasia, Ivan was no longer the fearful child or the vengeful enemy. He became a wise leader, a reformer, a military genius. Sudebnik, 1550. When law replaced violence, Ivan understood one thing: to control power, you must control the law. In 1550, he issued the Sudebnik, a new legal code that brought order and reduced the arbitrary power of the boyars. For the first time in Russian history, the law stood above individual will. He established the Zemsky Sobor, the first representative assembly, giving the people a voice. He created the Streltsy, Russia's first professional standing army. These were not small reforms. This was a revolution. But what made Ivan a legend wasn't the law. It was a battle. The Khanate of Kazan, a remnant of the Golden Horde, lay east of Moscow, a centuries-long threat. They raided, kidnapped, and attacked Russia's borders relentlessly. Ivan decided, enough. In 1552, he gathered 150,000 troops, along with artillery and military engineers, and marched east. But here's what made this battle legendary. Ivan didn't just fight, he innovated. Tactic 1, the mobile fortress. Ivan ordered the construction of a massive wooden fortress, Sviazhsk, far from the battlefield. Then he had it dismantled, transported by boat down the Volga River, and reassembled in just 4 weeks near Kazan. Pause, do you understand the significance of this? The Kazan forces thought they were safe. They thought it would take the Russians months to build a base. But when they woke up, a city had appeared before their eyes. This was the most advanced military logistics of its time. Sviazhsk became an impregnable base, allowing Ivan to besiege Kazan effectively. Tactic 2, explosives underground. But Kazan's walls were formidable. A traditional siege would take months. Ivan didn't have that time. So what did he do? He dug tunnels. Ivan's military engineers dug underground passages beneath the city walls, placing explosives at the weakest points. On October 2nd, 1552, Ivan gave the order. Bring down the walls! A deafening explosion. The walls collapsed. The Russian army stormed in. This was the first time in Russian history, and one of the first in the world, that explosives were used to destroy defensive fortifications. Ivan didn't just win with strength, he won with intellect.
For the glory of Russia!
The significance, Russia was no longer a small nation. The victory at Kazan didn't just eliminate a centuries-long threat, it changed the map. Russia now controlled the entire Volga River, the trade lifeline of the East. In 1556, Ivan conquered Astrakhan, opening the way to the Caspian Sea. For the first time in history, Russia was no longer just a European nation. It was a multi-continental empire. This was the greatest turning point in Russian history. To commemorate the victory at Kazan, Ivan ordered the construction of an unprecedented architectural work, St. Basil's Cathedral, right on Moscow's Red Square. If you've ever seen images of Moscow, you'll recognize this cathedral. Its vibrant, fantastical onion domes. No structure like it existed in Russia or even Europe. It symbolized the union of East and West, an emblem of the new Russian Empire. But then there's a story told and retold, though its truth is uncertain. Legend has it that after the cathedral was completed, Ivan summoned the architect, Postnik Yakovlev. He asked, "Can you build something more beautiful than this?" Postnik replied, "Yes, Your Majesty, I can." Ivan fell silent. Then he ordered, "Blind him." The reason? To ensure that no one else, no king, no empire, could possess a masterpiece like it. This is Ivan. a great patron of the arts and an absolute tyrant, coexisting in one man. Ivan transformed Russia into an empire. He was a reformer, a military genius, a patron of the arts. This period is called Ivan the Reformer. But then, something no one expected happened. In August 1560, Anastasia died. The official cause, illness. But Ivan didn't believe it. He believed his wife was poisoned. And in the mind of a man betrayed throughout his childhood, there are no coincidences, only conspiracies. When Anastasia was alive, she was the bridge between Ivan and his humanity. She reminded him that not everyone was an enemy. But when she died, that bridge broke. Ivan lost the only thing keeping him from falling into darkness. And this time, no one could pull him back. After Anastasia's death, Ivan trusted no one. He married 6 more times. None could replace Anastasia. Ivan was searching for something he had lost forever. He became paranoid. He believed the boyars were plotting to overthrow him. He believed the entire nation was betraying him. In 1564, Ivan did something unthinkable. He abandoned Moscow, announcing his abdication. The nation fell into chaos. The people begged him to return. Ivan agreed, but on one condition: Russia would be divided in 2. One half, the Oprichnina, would be under his direct rule, where he held absolute power over life and death. And he created the Oprichniki, a black-robed army on black horses, bearing the symbols of a dog's head in a broom. The dog's head to sniff out betrayal. The broom to sweep away traitors. This wasn't an army, it was a tool of terror. They say genius and madness are separated by a thin line. For Ivan, that line had snapped. In January 1570, Ivan received a rumor that the city of Novgorod was plotting to surrender to Poland. There was no evidence, just a rumor. But for Ivan, that was enough. He led the Oprichniki to Novgorod and ordered a massacre. Over 5 weeks, an estimated tens of thousands were killed. Men were tortured, women were raped, children were thrown into frozen rivers. One account tells of Ivan sitting on a throne in the city square, watching the deaths and asking the survivors, "Do you still want to betray me?" This was no longer a leader. This was a completely broken soul. In Ivan's mind, he wasn't a murderer. He was cleansing Russia. He thought he was saving the country from traitors, but the reality was, he was killing the innocent. Ivan, now 51, was in the palace. His son, Ivan Ivanovich, 27, the only heir, entered the room. They argued. About what? No one knows for certain. But the aging Ivan lost control. He raised his iron scepter and struck his son's head. One blow, just enough to crack his skull. Ivan Ivanovich collapsed. Blood poured. Within hours, he was dead. According to witnesses, Ivan cradled his son's body, wailing, begging for forgiveness. He cried out, "I have killed my son! I have killed my son!" But it was too late. That blow didn't just kill a man. It killed the future of the Rurik dynasty. Ivan died while playing chess. But in truth, Ivan had died long before. He died the day Anastasia died. What remained was just a body trying to survive. So, was Ivan a tyrant? Yes, no one can deny that. But he was also a genius, a reformer, an architect of an empire. He used technology, strategy, and vision to transform a broken nation into a great power. He built mobile fortresses, used explosives in warfare, and created timeless architectural masterpieces. But he also killed tens of thousands of innocents. He killed his own son. The question isn't, Was Ivan a good man or a bad man? The question is, why did a genius become a monster? And the answer lies in his childhood. A child abandoned, beaten, betrayed. A child who learned that love is weakness, and weakness will kill you. When Anastasia was alive, she kept him from the darkness. But when she died, nothing could hold him back. Ivan wasn't a monster born from nothing. He was the product of a brutal system, a betrayed childhood, and a soul that was never healed. This isn't an excuse for what he did. Nothing can excuse the deaths of thousands of innocents. But it's a reminder that tyrants are not born, they are made. And if we don't understand that, history will repeat itself. So what do you think? Was Ivan a genius or a monster? Or was he both? And more importantly, if you were Ivan, would you be any different? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your perspective on this story. And if this story touched you, don't forget to share it, because sometimes the most painful stories are the most valuable lessons. Before you judge a monster, ask, who created it? And more importantly, are we creating new monsters every day?